All right, welcome everybody. We're into chapter 3 this week, which is the first of what I call the core chapters, which are chapters 3 through 9 in your textbook. Basically, the chapters 3 through 9 in your textbook, this is what HR people do. And the first thing they do when they go to work is analyze work and design jobs. So that's the topic of this week. All right, so let's take a look at the key idea for this week. So job analysis is the basis and starting point for key HR processes and activities. All right, so what does that mean? Well, simply, let's just take, for example, if you were working at Tim Hortons, all right? So job analysis is the work that needs to be done. So what's the work that needs to be done at Tim Hortons? Well, obviously the customers need to be served, the staff needs to be hired, the staff needs to be trained, what else? The lettuce needs to be bought, the eggs need to be cooked, et cetera, right? So job analysis is just taking a look at all the work that needs to be done. All right, once you've done your job analysis, the next part is your job description, is your job, design. And what your job design is at that point is we've got to put all this work into jobs. So somebody's going to be a cook, somebody's going to be the person who is the server, somebody's going to be the manager, all right? So job analysis leads to job design. And this is really the basis and starting point for all other key human resource management processes and activities. So for example, once we know that all the work involved in being a server at Tim Hortons, that'll help us when hiring, because we need to have people who are capable of understanding an order and putting through an order, things like that. So for recruiting and hiring, it's important. For training, it's important. Obviously, we need to train people on how to go ahead and put through an order. How much is the job worth? Okay, that's also, if we're just person, all they really need to do is take an order and put it into the system. That's the skills needed for that is far less than if we need somebody like a computer scientist or a PhD in sociology. All right, so that deals in with the chapter 7 stuff, which is the chapter 7. It is chapter 7 stuff, which is the compensation. And finally, job analysis, did they do a good job? So how do we know that the order was done right? All right, well, we have to know, first of all, what's the work that goes into that, which is chapter 8. Okay, so the key, real simple point here is job analysis is the basis and starting point for all key HR processes and activities. The stuff we do in chapter 3 leads into 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Here's a pro tip, because you like these, so take note, write this down somewhere because you'll need this. If you are given a case study for human resource management, there's a whole bunch of problems in that case study. The first place you should go is probably job analysis, all right, because it's the basis and starting point. So just remember that, because it's very likely you will be given a case study, and it's very likely that the answer, or one of the answers to the questions, or one of the places to start is start with job analysis. Get her, got her, good? Awesome. All right, proceed. Learning objectives. There's 4 in this chapter here. Less content in this chapter certainly than the previous chapter. And we'll go through each one of these, as always, in, wait for it, excruciating detail. All right, learning objective number 1. Summarize the elements of workflow. There's a definition you need to know. The elements of workflow analysis and how it relates to an organization's structure. Okay, so we talk about workflow analysis. That's sort of all the work that needs to be done in order to achieve something at work. So again, I'm hung up on Tim Hortons today. All right, so you've got to ask yourself, okay, what is all the tasks that need to be done to put together Bill's order? And Bill's order, when he goes to Tim Hortons, is usually a large coffee with 1 cream and a bagel belt. In fact, bagel belts. I'm very passionate about bagel belts. Let me tell you, because I'm going to digress here for a second, about the second best day of my entire life. The second best day of my entire life, I went to Tim Hortons. And I went in, I ordered what did I order? Of course, usual order, a large coffee with 1 cream and a bagel belt. And the bagel belt came back, and guess what? Normally, a bagel belt will either have sausage or bacon. And I specified I want bacon, but this particular bagel belt had both sausage and bacon on the same bagel belt. It was, mistake in my favor, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was just the most awesome sandwich that had both bacon and sausage on the same sandwich, and I only had to pay for the bacon. So that, my friends, was the second best day of my life. And you go, cool story, Bill. Sounds really great. I'm sure you're really happy with your sandwich. But kind of begs the question, what was the best day of your entire life? Well, friends, the best day of my entire life was the first time that happened, because this was the second time it happened. The first time I had a bagel belt with both sausage and bacon on the same bagel belt. And don't get me wrong, I've had other good days in my life, like the day I got married, probably the day both my children were born, but sausage and bacon on the same bagel belt doesn't get much better than that. All right, fine, moving right along then. Couple of key terms we'll need to know about workflow, okay? So first one is a job, and a job is a set of related duties. So for example, you could have a job as a ditch digger, one who digs a ditch. What do you have to do? The related duties. Well, one is obviously be able to dig a hole. You'll probably have to clean up the site. You'll probably have to drive to the site. So driving to the site is going to be a related duty. And finally, you may have to make sure that your tools are in really good order. So being able to sharpening the shovel might be one of your related duties. Okay, so that's known as a job, a set of related duties, like a ditch digger or a college instructor. It's another example of a job. Position, a job performed by a specific person. So Joe's contracting might have 4 ditch digger positions. Medicine Hat College has a number of different instructors. They have, I think, 7 or 8 business instructors. So that's the job of a business instructor is held by 7 or 8 different people. So there's 7 or 8 positions of the job instructor. Now, where job analysis comes in is where you start mapping these workflows. Okay, and I'll go through this in detail on the next slide, but really the parts are the outputs, activities, and inputs. So let's go back to Bill's order of a bagel belt with a large coffee and 1 cream. All right, so the outputs of that, what's the work involved in that? The outputs, obviously, they completed order. So the order is paid for and packaged, and Bill has his bagel belt and a large coffee with 1 cream. That's the output. Activities, what needs to be involved? Well, you need to obviously get the bagel. You have to toast the bagel. You have to cut the bagel. You have to cook the egg or reheat the egg, is whatever they do at Tim Hortons there. You have to be able to pour the coffee. You have to make sure that 1 cream goes in there. You have to receive the cash. And essentially that's it. Maybe thank Bill for his patronage as well. That would be another activity. Okay, outputs, activity, the inputs, the raw inputs, those would be things like the hamburger, the lettuce. It would also be things like maybe Bill wants to pay for cash, so maybe there has to be some cash available at the register for change, right? So those are the inputs. The equipment would be things like the equipment, obviously the things to slice the bagel, the things to heat or cook the eggs, the coffee maker, the cash register, I don't know, even the lights in the building, right, would be the equipment. Okay, and finally the human resources, people with skills, nunchuck skills, computer hacking skills, bow hunting skills. I'm still hung up on that little bit from Napoleon Dynamite. So these people with skills and knowledge and abilities to perform the task. So people who can understand English, people who know the difference between the button for 1 cream and 2 cream, and any other abilities. The ability to be able to work an 8-hour shift without keeling over. All right. So those are the elements when you're mapping a workflow. So you can think of that as workflow about Bill getting an order at Tim Hortons. You could also think of that as there might be inputs, activities, and outputs for somebody to teach a course, like in human resource management. All right, we can map the workflow up for that. Okay, so then let's go into a little bit more detail. Raw inputs, what materials, data, and information are needed for this workflow to put together the order. And again, we talked about that. That's the eggs, the bacon, the sausage, the cash, okay, the what else? That sort of stuff. Okay, so yeah, the information. Okay, it would be another raw input. Equipment, special equipment, facilities, and systems. Again, we talked about the coffee makers, the cash register, the lights, the queuing equipment, all that sort of stuff, the facilities in Tim Hortons. And the human resources, what knowledge, skills, and abilities are needed, all right? The ability to understand the English, the mobility to be able to walk over and push the coffee maker, etc. All right, so those inputs, the activities then are when you're combining all these inputs. So activity would be things like, I don't know, receiving the order, making change for the order, slicing the bagel, cooking the eggs, packaging the whole thing. And finally, the output, what is product information or services provided. So at the end of the day, Bill has a nicely packaged bagel belts and a coffee. How was the output measured? Was it done correctly? Did the person collect the amount of money? Was it cooked properly so Bill didn't come back and complain? All right, so that's a very simple example of a workflow analysis. Okay, and certainly that's only one workflow at Tim Hortons. There's other things. There might be a workflow, but let's say that the servers needed to be scheduled for a week. So there's a whole bunch of inputs, equipment, human resources, activities, and outputs. That the washrooms need to be cleaned. There'd be a workflow around that. Let's say an assistant manager needs to be hired. There'd also be a workflow on that. All right. So I think we've kind of beat that one to death. So once you have all your workflows figured out, the next thing you need to do is incorporate that into your organizational structure. So units and individuals must cooperate. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of things that need to be done. Obviously, the washrooms need to be cleaned. People need to be served, servers need to be hired, all those sorts. So what happens there is the organization structure is able to do that. So the way they do that at Tim Hortons is you have a shift manager who reports probably to a store manager who reports to a regional manager, okay? In the college, you have units and individuals cooperate to teach the business program. So again, you have a whole bunch of instructors. They report to a dean. Dean reports to a vice president. Vice president reports to a president. All right. So structure then brings people together and brings workflows together to basically put together the whole mission of your organization. So there's two types of structures you might have with workflow. One is called a centralized structure, where the authority is concentrated at the top of the organization. So a really good example of that might be an automobile plant where you have an assembly line. Okay, that's a very top-down, centralized sort of structure that you have. Okay, so there's really not a lot of creativity. So the word comes down from the top. This is the way you do it, and that's the way it's done. The other alternative is something called a decentralized structure. And in a decentralized structure, rather than being top down, it's more of a bottom up. Okay, authority spread amongst other people. And typically in a lot of organizations where there's creativity required, a decentralized structure is more appropriate. So for example, if you have a whole bunch of People working on a space, working on research on how to go into space. Okay, so you have rocket scientists. All right, that's a lot of research. So you have a task, but there's really no one way to do that task. So in something like that, authority is spread among other people. You have more of a team approach. Again, research lab finding the cure for COVID. You're not going to get people dictating from the top. Basically, you got to try a whole bunch of different things. You got to be very creative. So authority tends to be spread amongst different people in a decentralized structure. All right, so a college is kind of somewhere in between the two. Obviously, there's things to be done, but certainly when we get down to teaching the course, you've got a lot of leeway on how to do that, much more leeway than you have, say, at Tim Hortons on how you make a bagel belt. All right, so let's cycle back then on that first one here is summarize the elements of workflow analysis and how it relates to the organization structure. Okay, so what have we got here? Okay, so workflow then is a series of tasks that needs to be done. It involves human resources inputs and what's the other one there? Oh, big bill. Inputs, equipment, human resources. They have activities, and finally it has output, right? And depending on the type of workflows you have, whether it's fairly straightforward stuff and standardized, that's more, it's better to have more of a top-down structure, okay? If you have something that's more creative, something like finding a cure for COVID, which requires a whole bunch of experimentation and creativity, that's bottom-up structure is where authority is further down the organization is more appropriate. All right, first one. Second one talks about, talks about what is the significance of job analysis and identify the elements of a job analysis. Okay, so why is it important and what's a part of a job analysis? All right, so let's take a look. Simple slide. Systematic study of a job to discover its specification and skill requirements. All right, so what exactly does a server at Tim Hortons do? What exactly does an instructor at Medicine Hat College do, right? In order to find this out, we need to do what's known as a job analysis. Okay, what they do. And then the second part is discover the specifications and requirements. And this is what skills plus do they need, okay? We'll talk about that more. Say what they do, what they need is basically job analysis. Okay, uses of job analysis. Remember I said job analysis is the basis or starting point for many important HR processes. So the stuff we do in chapter 3 is needed for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Just quickly. What does it do? So work design. Okay, so who does what? So we figured out what needs to be done in order to get an order done. Figure out what needs to be done and what gets a server hired, washroom cleans, all those basically go into what's called job design. Okay, so we take all those functions and put them into jobs. Once you have the jobs, HR planning. How many people do you need? When do you need? And who do you need? All right, so how many people are we going to need to staff the restaurant? At noon, at 6 o'clock, at midnight. Okay, when and where and who. Talent acquisition. Okay, who do we hire? Again, if we've decided we designed the jobs like Tim Hortons, where a lot of it's is really automated. I love the bit at Tim Hortons. You don't even have to be able to measure the amount of cream. It's press one button for one, second button for 2 creams. Love that stuff. Okay, so knowing that we just need somebody with the skills to differentiate one button from number 1 button for 1 cream from 2 button for 2 creams, that gives us a really good idea of the type of person that we need to hire. All right, so recruiting. And when we're actually doing our interviews for that, we'll have an idea there, right? What kind of talent we need. Again, training, what the employees need to know. So again, once we've figured out what the work and put it into jobs, and maybe some of those people don't have all the skills that they need when they're hired, again, we'll train them. So we'll train them, where the number 1 cream button is and the number 2 cream button is, for example. Performance and management, did they do a good job? So at Tim Hortons, in order to figure out if they did a good job, we need to know what their job was in the first place. So did they actually perform all the tasks they need to do, and did they do it in a quality way? Okay, that is the chapter 7 stuff, I believe. Chapter 8, career planning, helping employees progress in the organization. So people might start as a server. Eventually, we need some people to be shift managers and store managers. So once we realize, the different type of works that the store manager and the shift manager does, and we have people who are servers aspiring to be that, we can help with that if we've done our job analysis. Job analysis, how much do we pay? So again, we're at Tim Hortons. Okay, the person has to have the ability to differentiate between the 1 cream button and 2 cream buttons. Okay, that's not rocket science or rocket surgery. I love that. Not rocket surgery. It's a mixed metaphor. We don't need a PhD in sociology to do this. Okay, we don't need a medical doctor with 8 years of training. All right, so we're going to pay accordingly. We're going to pay accordingly somebody who's able to differentiate the 1 cream button from 2 cream button, rather than being able to perform brain surgery. All right, so again, just an example there. Job analysis is a starting point for many other HR processes. Okay, the manifestation here of job analysis here comes into something called the job description. Okay, it's quite simply what a job description is: a listing of the tasks, duties, and responsibility, the TDRs. So JDs require TDRs. And you know what TDR is? TDR? What do you call something like that? We call that a TLA. A TDR is a TLA. And you go, what's a TLA? That's nowhere in the book. No, but you should know this in life. A TLA is a 3-letter acronym. Get that? Think about that one. All right. So job description is a TDR, your tasks, duties, and responsibilities. All right. So what you do. Okay, so financial investment analysis, this is what they do. They evaluate financial risk, they analyze investment projects, et cetera, et cetera. What is an instructor at Medicine Hat College? Well, they teach courses. They, what else do they do? They teach courses. They put together exams. They, what else? Mark stuff, all right? So those would all be in a job description. So that's one key output of the job analysis, job description. The other key output is something called job specifications, otherwise known as KSAOs, which is actually a 4-letter acronym here. So your KSAOs are basically what I call your skills plus. What do you need to do that, right? So what do you need in order to be a financial and investment analyst? Well, a bachelor's degree in commerce or business or economics, okay? You might need to have a CFA, but it's more than just knowledge. You must have, the analytical skills. You must have some empathy. You must have good communication skills. All those things are part of your KSAOs, right? Which is what this next slide does. All right, so this is just kind of a recap. A job description is a list of duties, tasks, the TDRs, the observable actions, specification, lists of KSAOs. Observable only when the TDRs are being carried out. All right, so if I talk about the job of an instructor at college, parts of the job description. Well, they have to design the course. They have to deliver the lectures. They have to mark the tests. They have to listen to whining students. Job specifications, okay? To design the course, they need subject knowledge. So hopefully somebody like me teaching human resource management should know a little bit about human resource management. And I do, because I've worked in it, got a master's degree, taught this course 45 times, 46, 47, 48, 49 now after this time. What else? Deliver lectures. They need to have public speaking skills. Be able to get up in front of people. We're in a classroom, so one of these days when we get back to that. Right now, we just have to be able to sit in front of a Zoom meeting and be recorded. What else? Marking. So you need to have judgment skills, all right? You need to be able to figure out whether the answer is worthy of an A, B, or C. And finally, listening to wanting students. Job specification, you have to have empathy. And believe me, people, I care a lot. All right, so let's go back and recap number 2 here. I want to talk about here. Okay, so essentially, what is job analysis? Job analysis is the study of jobs. What's the significance of job analysis is the fact that it is the basis for all the other things we do in HR. And the elements of a job analysis. Okay, so that's essentially what you have there are the job description, which is the TDRs, and the job specification, which are the KSAOs. Get her, got her, good? All right, awesome. Okay, we're into objective 3, and objective 3 says, tell how to obtain information for job analysis and review job analysis development. So essentially what this objective covers is where do I get the information to do a job analysis, and second of all, what's hot in job analysis, what's brand new, what's a new trend. Okay, so we'll dive into this part here, which talks about sources of job information. And the list 3, there's actually 4. So the one you could add to here is an existing job description. You always want to start with an existing job description because, as the old cliche goes, why reinvent the wheel, right? So if you want to put one in before here, that would be start with the existing job description. Okay, failing that, where do you go? Well, the first is to incumbents. An incumbent is a fancy word for the employee, people who currently do the job. Probably the advantage of this is they usually can provide good estimates of time it takes to do the various duties. Disadvantage of incumbents or employees is quite often it's difficult to be objective with your own job. You may think that you do this duty a lot, or you may think that this duty is really important, but whether it actually is may or may not be, right? So objectivity oftentimes is a difficulty in asking an incumbent, for information about their job. Observer, so observers, these are your supervisors, your managers, okay? So they should know your job because chances are they may have done your job at one point. The other thing is they can be a little more objective, so they can identify what really is the important duties, at least more important to the organization rather than maybe important to the individual. Disadvantages of supervisor, does your supervisor really know what you do? All right, they may think you know what you do, but obviously they're not observing you 100% of the time in most jobs. So what you do or what they think you do and what you do may be 2 different things. The third area of information is sort of generic websites, and the federal government is one good source. And there's something called the NOC, National Occupational Classification, and these are generic job descriptions for a wide variety of different jobs in Canada. So let's show you what this looks like. So to find the NOC, just put NOC, Government of Canada, something like that into Google. You'll end up at this site here, right? And in order to find a job, sorry, your site's going to look like this. Yeah, okay, National Occupational Classification is going to look like this. All right, so enter your job title. Let's see if we can find out what a phlebotomist does. What a great word, A-P-H, how do I spell this? L-E-B-O-T-O, phlebotomist. And for those of you who don't know what a phlebotomist is one who draws blood, kind of like Dracula, except in a more professional setting, you actually get paid for this. And you go, wow, you know a lot, Bill. How did you know what a phlebotomist was? Well, full disclosure here, my brother had a friend who was a phlebotomist at one time. All right. So if you put phlebotomist into the magic search engine, it comes up with medical laboratory technicians and pathologists. And if you look down, it's the one, fourth, fifth one here, phlebotomist. Okay. So what does a phlebotomist do? Well, main duties. Okay, collect, source, and prepare blood, tissue, and other samples for patients. Basically, draw bloods. There's a whole bunch of stuff. They need to clean and maintain the medical laboratory as well. All right, so that's what it is. So the main duties, this would be sort of the job description part, the task duty, TDRs, task duties, responsibilities. Employment requirements, these are the KSAOs, or the job specifications. Medical laboratory technical assistance requires the completion of a community college certificate program in medical laboratory science. So like everything else today, basically stay in school if you want to become a phlebotomist, and there's a whole bunch of other things you can get as well. All right, so that's just a real simple example from the NOC. Okay, and like I said, you can put pretty much any job in Canada in there, and it'll come up with a very basic job description for that particular job. Okay, so those are your 4 sources. Remember, I also had job descriptions in there. A little bit more detail on this. Sources of job, you start by determining your source of job data. So that could be existing job description. Generally start with the humans, which are the incumbents and supervisors, and then go to the non-humans. All right, so these are the sources. The data collection instruments. So how do you find out from these people if you're asking what they're doing in their job? Well, you can build your own questionnaire, or their standard questionnaires. One's called the PAC, another one's called the Fleshman Job Analysis. So once you've got your data collection instrument, then you need to choose the method of data collection. That could be a matter of mailed questionnaires or emailed questionnaires, as the case may be. Face-to-face interviews, employee logging, have the person keep a diary of what's done. Observation, which is stalking, although I guess we call it observation if you have permission to do that. And probably the one that makes the most sense is combination thereof. So a combination of interviews, mailed questionnaires, etc. Back when I had an honest job, I worked in human resources. One of the things I did for about a year was write a lot of job descriptions. So typically what we did was we would mail, or I guess email, questionnaires to the supervisors and the incumbents, get them to fill it out, and then we'd take in the questionnaires, and then we'd follow up with a face-to-face interview. And then we would write a job description based on that. That's the way that we did it way back in the day. Okay, so that's how you get the information to write a job description. What's new, what's hot, what's not in developments in job analysis. And the whole idea now is what's called a competency-based approach. Okay, where you focus on personal capabilities rather than tasks. So essentially, what this is saying is, rather than focusing on a job description, it's more focusing on the job specification, the KSAO, knowledge, skills, aptitudes, and other. All right, so why would it make sense to focus on the KSAOs rather than the actual task, the job description? And the answer lies in that jobs, particularly in this day and age, tend to change quite a bit for a number of different reasons: technology, strategy, structure. And once you have a job description written down, it can tend to get a little bit rigid. People will say, oh, that's not my job description. Now, if you focus on competencies rather than tasks and duties, that helps with the flexibility. Just to give you a simple example, in my case, when I started teaching college about 30 years ago, Basically, if you could get up and talk to people, talk to students, if you could make a few overhead transparencies, write on the board, do a little paper and pencil marketing, you were good. We rarely used a computer, okay, other than maybe a little bit of email was starting to come at that time. Now, job as a instructor is probably 50–60% of the time is usually spent in and around computers. All right, so rather than trying to hire people who are great lecturers, people who are really good making overheads, if you worked on people with an ability to learn and ability to learn computer skills, that's kind of a better way to go. All right, so the key item here, or the key development job analysis, is sort of a more of a focus on the job specifications when we're looking for people, the skills, knowledge, aptitudes, and other, versus looking for people who've done the actual tasks. Okay, so job specifications is more competency-based approach over job descriptions, which is more just writing a job description. Okay, cycling back then, tell how to obtain information for job analysis. Okay, where do we get the information? Well, from incumbents, from supervisors, from government websites, and from existing job descriptions. And what's new in job analysis, the focus more on competencies or job specifications rather than focusing on the job description, okay, or the tasks. Number 4, learning objective 4, understand the different approaches to job design. All right, so when we talk about job design is, once we figured out all the workflows, how do we cobble those together into meaningful work units that people can actually do. Design here. Process of defining the way work will be performed and tasks that the job requires. So, simple example here, an instructor at Medicine Hat College delivers a face-to-face course for 3 hours per week over a 14-week period. The instructor delivers lectures, sets and marks assignments, tests, tutors students one-on-one during office hours, etc. All right, so that's the process of figuring out all the work that needs to get done in order to teach a student a course and cobble it into a job. Now, to design jobs effectively, you need to thoroughly understand how the job works and the work units, your work units flow process. So you've got to understand what it takes to teach a course, but you've also got to understand how that's going to work with the organizational structure. So this case, the Department of Business, how they organize their work and how their work fits in with the whole academic plan at Medicine Hat College. Okay, now there's 3 approaches to job design. They have 4 here, but 2 are really combined here. One, we can design for efficiency. And we'll talk about that in a moment. We could design for motivation, or you can design for health, and these can be physical health and mental health. And we'll go through each one of these in excruciating detail. Okay, so we'll start with designing for efficiency. Now, to wrap your head around designing for efficiency, let's talk about automobile assembly, all right? If I wanted to make 3,000 cars, I roughly have 2 very different approaches. One approach could be to say, all right, I'm going to break the process down into 3,000 steps and get every person to do 1 step. So one person will be putting on the right front tire. One person will be putting in the headlight. One person will be doing a weld between the chassis and the frame. All right. So that would be extreme specialization. The other way, if I wanted to make 3,000 cars, is I could hire 3,000 people and give them a whole pile of parts and tell each person to assemble a car. Okay. So each person would assemble 1 car from doing all 3,000 different tasks, okay, 1 by 1. Okay, and that would be obviously not specialized, okay? That would be not using specialization. Okay, So taking the first approach, which is really basically what we're talking about here, is an assembly line. Some advantages of that. Well, increasing productivity. All right. So yes, if I'm going to make 3,000 cars, to make them faster, quicker, cheaper, it'd probably be better. Would be better, obviously, to do it on a assembly line rather than have each person build a car, much like they would build a shed out in their backyard. Decreases the training. Okay, so if I have one person doing a single task, I don't have to train them in a lot of things. All right, the only thing they have to do is put the headline in. It's the only thing they have to do is put the right front wheel on. That really decreases my training, as opposed to having to teach them to do all the different jobs, right? The welding and the painting and the design, that whole thing, right? So decrease your training. And similar to that, increases the labor pool, right? If all we have, the jobs are really dumbed down and simple, then a lot more people can do that, right? So we can find more people, and it costs us less than to have 3,000 people who all have to have the skills to be able to put together an entire car together. The whole thing. Disadvantages. It's going to be really boring on the assembly line. If I'm working on the assembly line for 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year for 20 years, and all I ever do is put the same wheel on, or put the same headlight in the same place, or do the same weld, I'm going to be pretty bored pretty soon. It'll probably be exciting for maybe the better part of an hour, and then I've got the rest of my career. So obviously with boredom becomes dissatisfaction. So be happier with you, probably less happy doing a specialized job. And really they hold less appeal for educated workers. Okay. And if you want to add a fourth one here, the chances of injury, repetitive sprain injuries, particularly if you're doing the same thing all the time, would be another disadvantage. Okay, so designing for efficiency. When we do that, achieve maximum output with minimum inputs. Okay, so the best way to put 3,000 cars together is probably break it down into assembly line. You're using something called scientific management and industrial engineering. Stresses, time, efficiency, and effort, time, labor costs, and training and employee learning cost. All right, so again, you don't have to put a lot of other stuff to prep people to do the job, because they only have to do one thing. And there's really one best way to do the job when we're talking about that on an assembly line. The workflow, the key there is a sequence and balance between jobs. So in order to do this, you've got to spend quite a bit of time making sure your workflow is perfect. You got to coordinate. You got to make sure that the guy puts the axle on first before the guy installs the right front tire, that sort of thing. Okay. Criticism of the efficiency approach. Jobs are done down to the point where work is boring and repetitive. Okay, so people just say, "Ugh, this is awful, I'm going to quit." Or worse, they quit and stay and start sabotaging and do other stuff. And repetitive. Okay, repetitive strain injuries. Okay, so if I'm doing the same weld over and over and over again, same sort of movements, I'm going to wear out. Okay. So that being said, is most organizations combine industrial engineering or efficiency with other approaches. It's very rare that you can get into a situation where you're designing specifically for efficiency, mostly because those jobs have been replaced by robots. Okay, so the second one is designing jobs that motivate. And this is based on the work of Hackman and Oldham. And I'm thinking that you may have covered this in your organizational behavior course last semester. If you did, great. This is a nice review. Okay, so this also makes a great exam question, by the way, here. There's 5 different things that you use to create a more motivating job. Okay. And what are we looking at here? Okay, so this would be the difference. Okay, so let's talk about being an instructor for a minute. I find being an instructor kind of a motivating job. So starts with autonomy, the individual degree of control over the when, where, and how the job is done. All right, so the instructor, yeah, you have to be at the college Mondays. That's between 2 to 3 for a class, or Wednesdays or something like that. But other than that, you've got a fair degree of control over when you do the work. So when I do the prep, when you do the marking. and how the job is done. So you've got some choice over the textbook you use, a choice of what you're going to use for assessments, and assessments is quite a bit of autonomy. Variety, absolutely. Okay, it's not like putting the same headlight on the same place over and over and over again. Even with a course like human resource management, there's just a lot of different tasks. There's putting together lectures, putting together tasks, marking, etc. So there's more than one thing to do. Task identity, the feeling of responsibility and pride you get for doing an entire piece of work. So at the end of the semester, 40 people in my class, I look at it, the class average was like a B+, that's kind of cool, and now 38 out of the 40 people have credit in human resource management. And I get this nice warm feelings in the cockles, wherever your cockles are, the cockles of my gut, that I did a good job. Get the guy putting the one headlight on, he never sees what the finished car looks like. Okay, so there's really no task identity. Feedback, the amount of frequency of information received about how you're performing the job. So students can tell you whether you're doing a good job, not doing a good job. You get a little bit of feedback. You get formal feedback at the end of the semester, being an instructor. Feedback, installing the one headlight. Well, it's probably you're not getting a lot of feedback unless you do something wrong. Okay, so and the assembly line to grind to a halt. Other than that, there's not a lot of feedback. And task significance, the feeling you get where your job is important to others. So as an instructor, yeah, I think it's important that people learn business, people learn about human resource management, so it's a fairly significant task. Certainly not like a doctor, or it's not like looking for the cure for COVID, but compared to somebody who's just putting the one headlight on one place for an automobile, I'm not sure how the feeling you'd get would be that this is really, really important to the same degree as it would be curing COVID. Okay. Oops, wrong way. Let's go this way here. Okay. So those were the 5 characteristics. Now, tools to create more motivating jobs. All right. Now, for the purposes of this slide, let's think if you were a part of a crew at Superstore and you were stocking shelves, not stocking shelves, but actually putting stuff on shelves at the end of the day, right, or overnight. All right, how can you make that more motivating? So say the way they've got it right now is that you stock everything in the meat department, or everything in the bakery, or you stock everything in the dairy. That's your little thing, right? Well, one way to make it more motivating would be job enlargement, and that would be adding more tasks, okay, or job rotations. So the fact that maybe for a third of your shift you're in the dairy, third of the shift you're in the meat department, and third of the shift you're in the bakery. All right, so you could do it's still stocking shelves, but it's in a different place, right? So that would be known as job enlargement, and that would be a little bit more motivating than having to spend the entire shift in the bakery. Job enrichment, adding more complex tasks. So instead of just stocking the shelves, maybe the other thing you have to do is you maybe have to do an end display. That's really, really appealing. All right, which is a higher order task than just simply loading stuff into a place on the shelf there. So that would be known as job enrichment. If you were at Tim Hortons and you were a server, okay, maybe they might give you the task of putting together the schedule for a week, okay? So that's adding a complex task to make your job a little bit more interesting. Self-managed work teams. So rather than having a supervisor tell you exactly what to do every day, maybe get rid of the supervisor and you as a team decide what's the best way to do this. And actually, I've got a really good example of that, and it was a friend of mine who worked at a grocery store. That's how they stocked shelves. So there was a team of about 8 of them, and it was up to them to sort of divide all the tasks up and work together and figure out the best way or the fastest way to get the shelf stocked. And they actually got a bonus if they did it quicker. So they got like $1 an hour bonus if they stocked more than X items a night, right? And so that was really motivating. Flexible work schedules. So flex time, job sharing, compressed work week. Again, if we go with the stocking shelves, flex time. Well, the stuff has to be put on the shelves sometime between 10 at night and 8 in the morning. You need to get 7.5 hours in. It's up to you when you want to come in and when you want to leave, as long as you get your 7.5 hours in. Okay, so if you want to come in at 10 o'clock at night and finish at, what would that be, 5:30, that's fine. If you want to come in at 12:30 at night and finish at 8 o'clock in the morning, that's fine too. I'm not sure that job sharing and compressed work week would work, but compressed work week is you may decide as a group that you want to do 4 10-hour days rather than 5 8-hour days. When my wife worked at the city of Grand Prairie, they mowed lawns. So they decided that they were going to work 4 10-hour days rather than get the 3-day weekend rather than 5 8-hour days. So that's a compressed work week. And so have the flexibility of that would be more motivating. And then telework and remote work, which has really come to light with the COVID crisis and shutdowns and things like that. So yeah, if you were able to work from home, so you don't have to commute, or that can be a more motivating thing to do your job. If I had to do all my prep at the college, for example, that would be kind of a drag. The fact that I can work at home and work through, well, they say telework, now it's more like computer work here, that's a little bit more motivating. Okay, so that was designing for motivation. The last part is designing for health, and it's physical health and mental health. So physical health, key term here is ergonomics, study of the interface between an individual's physiology and the characteristics of the physical work environment. Now that is a mouthful, isn't it? Essentially what ergonomics is just designing the job so people aren't hurting themselves. Classic examples could be something like a keyboard. You see those ergonomic keyboards where the computer keys are kind of slanted to reduce strain on the fingers and wrists. Stand-up desks right now are huge. Okay? People are saying sitting is the new smoking. So rather than sitting all day at your office job, if you have a stand-up desk, you can choose to stand for part of it. All right, that's two really good examples of ergonomics. Okay, so the goal of ergonomics is to reduce the physical strain on the worker. So you can use machines and technologies. Okay, a really good example might be, rather than a broom to get rid of the snow, we can use a leaf blower. Ooh, look at that. Minimize the physical strain. And yes, reduce repetitive strain injuries. A good example of that would be the ergonomic keyboard here. Some concerns with physical health, concerns about mobile devices, pretty much, there's a lot of weird strains you get from tapping your phone the same way, or eye strain in particular, right? Or through laptops and touch screens and things like that, right? Final one is designing jobs for mental health and well-being. And this is known as cognitive work ergonomics. So probably the best example I can think of is think of a job of an air traffic controller. The person up in the control tower there, make sure the planes are all landing and not crashing into each other here. Very stressful job. Okay, lots going on there. So they have a lot of machines and a lot of different ways to limit the cognitive overload, the thinking overload, right? So you can start with the radar, and then you've got computers, and then you've got radios and all those things, right? So obviously by using a lot of those machines, they have the capacity to reduce the stress, okay, or and reduce the amount of mistakes between cognitive overload, right? So yeah, that would be a really good example of cognitive ergonomics there. Okay, design jobs so they can be performed ways that the brain processes information. And computers are a really good example of things that can help you process information faster, better, and have less of a cognitive overload there. Okay, cycle back then. So if we cycle back up to number 4, take a look, understand the different approaches to job design. So the different approaches to job design. There was designing for efficiency, okay, like for example, making 3,000 cars on an assembly line. There was designing for motivation, and that was the whole idea of adding things like autonomy and task significance to a job, okay, to make it more interesting. And the last one, approach to job design, was the whole idea of designing for safety or designing for physical and mental health, right? So both ergonomics, physically, like a stand-up desk, or cognitive ergonomics, things like having a computer or a radar to help your air traffic controllers. All right, and wrap up everything here. Oops, summary here. Quick recap here. So 4 things in this chapter. Number 1, workflow analysis. Okay, identifies the amount of work and the process needed to do the inputs outputs. So workflow analysis, just to recap there, you had your raw materials, your equipment, and your human resources. So you're thinking about putting together the bagel belt, for example. All those inputs go into activities, okay, like cooking the sandwich, like collecting the money. And finally, we get the output, a completed order where Bill gets his bagel belt, which has one coffee, black coffee, sorry, a large coffee with 1 cream, and a bagel belt with either the bacon or the sausage, whatever ordered. Don't make a mistake and put both on them. Job analysis, number 2, provides a foundation for carrying out many HRM responsibilities. So again, job analysis is the starting point. Okay, for things like recruiting, for things like compensation, for things like performance management, right? Key things in job analysis is the job description, which is that list of duties, and the job specifications, what the person needs to know, the KSAOs, which are knowledge, skills, aptitudes, and other. Number 3, job analysis information comes from incumbent supervisors and other sources, right? And there are pros and cons of each. Also, the other thing is the existing job description is a good source of information. And finally, you have approaches to job design. There were 3 basic categories. You could design for efficiency, like, for example, making 3,000 automobiles on an assembly line is a very efficient way to do it. You could design a job for motivation, so you can add things, and those things were things like autonomy, variety, task identity, feedback, and task significance. And finally, when you're designing a job, considering the physical and mental health. So physical things like ergonomics, like computer screens that don't shine in your eyes as badly, or stand-up desks, and mental health. So the fact that oftentimes using computers, make sure you have adequate breaks is another thing, in order that you're not overloading or stressing our person. That's it. That's all. That's chapter 3. We'll move on to next week, chapter 4, which deals with 2 things, which is workforce planning and recruiting.